Get started.
Talking about steps, getting problems.
Who does not have a book? Needs one. 1, 2, 3. All right, let's see. You need a book as well. We got a couple back there, a couple over there. Yes, ma'am. It's 2 enough, 3 enough? No. I don't want to be the cause of an accident nowadays. Yes, ma'am. She has one? Thank you. Yes, sir. All right, anybody else need a book? All right, there we go. I think we got plenty. Oh, all three of them? Okay. We got some more up here if we need to. You need one too, or you got one?
Oh, no, I'm waiting on it.
Oh, all right. All right. Good deal.
So he don't need one.
I'm sorry? Oh, he can't read no way? Okay, that's
There ain't no
fine.
pictures, and I don't look.
No, and you know what, I'm glad y'all said that. Where's Marcus's little book that Mamie has for him all the time? Right here. Here we go. One of these. I'm going to hold on to these for a minute. Okay. So I'm glad everybody is back with us this morning, and folks are still trickling in. That's all right. We're going to get books. If you need a book, let me know. Did you get a book, darling? You got a book? Okay. All right. We are going to begin a study on the book of Revelation. Now today is just going to be an introduction. So we still have in front of us, after today, we'll have broken up in 12 lessons. Go through basically each chapter. Sometimes we'll go through 2 chapters depending on what's being studied. And we'll walk through each one of those. But for an introduction, the title of this entire lesson is "The Church is Triumphant Through Jesus Christ the Lamb." The main focus of the entire book of Revelation is just that the church will be triumphant through Jesus Christ. God will win the fight in the long run. Okay, so we have to keep that in our mindset. And also this came from Emory Hills, the same folks that wrote the Prayer and Providence study that we just did this study with multiple people involved in that study. So it's a really good study, and I think we're all going to learn something hopefully from this. But you can see if you're going through your book, and if you did read the introduction, we're breaking this up into 12 different lessons, and it shows the text. So each week, what I'm going to ask that you do for homework, if you would. Do y'all need books, by the way? Y'all have a book? Okay, you got one. All right, good. You got a book? Okay. You need one. Okay. So what I'm going to ask that everybody do is to, each week, your homework assignment is going to be read the chapters associated with the next lesson and then answer the questions at the end of that lesson. Okay? So for example, next week when we come back, if you'll go to page, let's see, it goes right after the introduction. It's about 7 or 8 pages deep. You'll see where it says application, and then there's a big square. And then it says Revelation 1 through 8, the time is near. Looks kind of like this if you can see it. There's a little square box. That's basically indicating that that's the end of that lesson and what you should take away from that lesson. So the next lesson starts there. That'll be the homework is lesson 1. Read through chapter 1 of Revelation. And then we're going to go through the 10 questions at the end of that. Will help us focus on what we've read. Okay? And each week we'll go through that. So a little study ahead is going to be very important and very helpful when we understand this book. A little bit of factual data about Revelation. I think it's very important that we understand this so we can focus on and help us to understand some things as we go through it. Revelation was written by who? The Apostle John. All right. Does anybody know the approximate timeline or dates of when Revelation was written? Any guesses? Okay, so there's thoughts about 56 to 66. There's thoughts about 95 to 96. How many think it's 95 to 96? Show of hands. Anybody? Come on, it's controversial. Okay, we got one. Nobody else? All right, how many people think it's the 66? We got one. Okay, so now we got a debate. All right, great. Everybody else really is just going along with whatever, right? Okay, it's important to know and important to understand a little bit of the historical data behind the book, okay? Based on the research that I found, it is written between AD 95 and 96. That's based on the emperor at the time, where he was, and the factual data behind it. For example, who was the book written to? Seven churches of Asia. Okay, if it was written during 55, 56, or 66 time frame, what was going on with the seven churches of Asia at that time? Who was preaching to them? Paul was. Paul was preaching to them during that time. They were a very strong set of churches then. So that doesn't really quantify why they would have such an urgent message to them that needed to tell them, caution them on some bad things that were going on in the church, would it? However, in 95, 96, it does, because now they did not have the Apostle Paul with them, and they've had time to turn into the wrong direction. So it kind of solidifies that in 95 to 96 it was a better time for that to go along with history, and everything kind of lines up a little better. Where was John while this book was written? It tells us in the book, chapter 1. The island of Patmos. What was the island of Patmos known for? Exile, right? There was I think there's 3 islands there. Who was doing the exiling? Domitian. Okay, Domitian was the ruler at the time, but the island of Patmos was used as late as AD 904 for using as an imprisonment island. Okay, people were exiled from the king, Caesar, so people were sent there all the time. So it had been prior to Domitian, but it was all the way up to 904 was the latest historical data that I could find on it for imprisonment. John was sent there because of exile. Why? He was preaching the gospel, right? He was preaching the gospel up to that point, so he was sent to Patmos to be exiled. And we already established the ruler was Domitian. When did Domitian rule as Caesar? It's important to note this so that everything lines up for Revelation, right? Anybody know?
You said a while ago, 95, 96.
Well, that was about the end of it. So Domitian came in as Caesar from AD 81, and he died in AD 96. Once Domitian, who was the one that sent John to Patmos, died, now he was released. So that lines up with the approximate timeline of when this book was written, was right about the time he was released. Okay, so Domitian died in AD 96. So we're assuming 95 to 96 is when it was done. After his release, John left Patmos, and does anybody know where he lived afterwards? Ephesus. He went to Ephesus. That's correct. And then he continued his ministry, right? He died in AD 102, I believe, some 103. So he lived after this and continued his ministry. So that's also important to note, that also other things in the New Testament line up with that as well, because John's ministry continued. All right? The last book of the New Testament is Revelation. How many chapters? Anybody know? 22 chapters. Great. Okay, so that's just some basic factual data. I wanted to kind of throw that out there so that we understand a little bit of the historical context here. Did you have a book, sir? Okay, good. Anybody else need a book? I know we've had some folks coming in. I just want to make sure everybody has a book as we get started. All right. Number 1 goal. I want to establish the goal early onset so everybody understands where we're focused to. I want everybody rowing the boat in the same direction, right? I want us all working together so that we're all looking to get to the same end state, the same goal. It is simply this. I want us to better understand Revelation so that we're not afraid of it, to read it and to continue to get better. I promise you, we are not going to dig too deep into Revelation during this study. We are going to dig a little bit. We're going to scratch the surface. But we are not going to be Revelation experts by the end of this. Why? Because I'm not a Revelation expert. I'm not even going to try to proclaim to be a Revelation expert. However, the little bit of study that we are going to do will hopefully allow us to not have a mental block and get lost into the pictures of what's being shown in Revelation, right? For example, how many of y'all have heard of the the dragons and different things in Revelation, and those are foreseeing of things that are going to come. Okay, y'all have heard that, right? It's out there. One day is 1,000 years. 1,000 years is one day to God, right? Okay, we're going to talk about that here in just a minute, and we're going to establish that that's not necessarily the case when God communicates to us. Okay, so we're going to understand the language. We're going to understand some of the background, but I want everybody to understand that our goal is to better understand Revelation, scratching the surface so that we can understand context, we can understand what the basis of what's going on, and if we take all that away, every time we read Revelation, we can gain a little better and understand a little better as we continue to read and continue to study. But I'm not here to make everybody experts, because I can't do it, because I'm not one either. Okay? And I don't think that if we study this for 2 years, that we would still understand everything in this book. Okay, there's a lot of context. Okay, as the introduction here, as we're going to go through and touch a couple of different topics on Revelation as we have time. The second paragraph under the introduction. It is God's prerogative to withhold information from man, but we all must always remember that when He chooses to reveal something, He fully intends for man to understand what is revealed. The word revelation itself means disclosure or uncovering or unveiling. Jesus admonishes, "He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches." Blessing was pronounced upon those who would read, hear, and keep the things of the book. The man of understanding is told to calculate the number of the beast. Why then does Revelation seem so obscure and shrouded in mystery? So, the point is, Revelation was written for not only the 7 churches of Asia, but also for our benefit. Okay, we can learn from it. There is a message there that we have to understand. We can't be scared of it, right? Normally we get into, Genesis through Jude, and we stop and turn around and go back through Genesis. We're going to read the entire Bible, right? Or if we skim over it and we go, I'm reading this as a book that I really don't understand. I'm seeing words, and we don't really understand the context. Okay? Look, I can say that because I've done it. I've done that. I have read all the way through Revelation and went, I have no idea what I just read. Right? Until I began to connect dots and understand the context. Now you begin to understand what dragons mean and what 7 lampstands mean and those different things. Okay? As we go along, the biggest thing is do not get frustrated with the book. It was written in such a way that the 7 churches of Asia were supposed to understand it, right? Normal humans who had probably less of an education than we do, they understood it. They understood what was going on. So we can understand it as well. Now, we might not understand everything because we weren't there in the moment, but we should be able to understand this. Now, the literary style. The style of Revelation helps us to understand this. Does everybody know what this... Everybody see this book? Everybody sees this book, right? What is this book? Somebody tell me what this book is. It's a toddler's book, yeah. And inside of the book, everybody sees this. What does this look like? A picture book. There we go. It's a picture book. What is the picture book? Why do we give this to our kids? Why do we show this to our kids? I mean, we have several of these, right? Why is a picture book so important for the learning and understanding for a child? They get them to understand it, right? Through association. Through association. They associate a tractor here, right, with the color purple, and they begin to see the letters together, and eventually they learn how to read because they associate that group of letters saying tractor with what that thing is. Daddy, tractor, 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 right? So they learn that from a picture book. It paints an image in their mind so that they fully understand what is being said, and that's how they learn. So what I want you to take away from this is the book of Revelation is simply a picture book. I want us to understand that that's how the literary style was written. It was written as a picture book to the 7 churches of Asia. It was descriptive in such a way that they associated those things with what was going on. Okay? So that association, that learning was there as a picture book. If we read this in such a way and understand what the message was, we will begin to understand what was going on. Some things are given, in chapter 1, for example, Jesus tells us what the lampstand stood for. Okay, there's some things that are descriptive that now we begin to understand why they're talking that way. But it is nothing more than telling a story to associate what is going on with this image. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay.
Tell them what Jesus did with parables.
Yes, just exactly what Jesus did with parables. It says here in the 3rd paragraph, the pictorial richness of what's being said. You see dragons and serpents and beasts and angels and horses and rainbows and thrones and altars and fire and hail and all these different things. How big of an image does that create for somebody? Does that make a big image to where they can go, oh, okay. And then when they understood what those things represented, now they see what John was seeing, right? That's simply, all that is if I sent an astronaut to the moon, right, with no cameras, and the astronaut lands on the moon, and they say, astronaut, tell me what you see. You have to be the eyes and ears as an astronaut to everybody else that is reading that text to fully understand. If you say, well, there's some dirt and it's gray and it's dusty, and well, that's about it. There's nothing really here. Is that a very good pictorial image of what's going on the moon? No. But they can do different things like, oh, if I look to my left, I can see the earth and it's blue and these valiant pictures and the blue and green and the haze and the sun is behind it just to the left and upper. Do you see how you begin to paint a picture pictorially by words? That's exactly what's going on here in the literary style of Revelation. Okay? It's simply John is the one that is sending that message. And it's just as if we sent an astronaut to, and actually they had to do that, believe it or not. If you look up about Apollo 13, they had to do that. The astronauts were taught to be descriptive and do their reports back in a very descriptive manner. So this is what's going on in Revelation. So please understand that. So the numbers and different things, they will begin to understand a little better. Also, yes?
Maybe that would be because, the church back then was persecuted, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they had codes, maybe they thought, well, that's just a bunch of fairy tale stuff, but the Christian knew what it meant. It was like code to them, and they knew what that meant. And that's what they wanted to persecute.
Right. So I wouldn't necessarily call it code, right? John didn't change what he had seen into a different language that we really couldn't understand, nor did God necessarily put it into a language that nobody understood. But you are right. God knew what he was doing when he made those images. So God simply said it in a way that, yes, you're correct. Only the Christians would understand what was going on because they related, right? So it wasn't necessarily put in code, but it was done in a descriptive manner to where the receiver was the only one that was understanding the message. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. But here's another way to help understand it. Old Testament terminology. If we don't understand the Old Testament stories, you're not going to understand Revelation. Okay? So we've got to relate those two together because we'll call it 90% of the Old Testament stories are 90% of the stories in Revelation relate to what has either been prophesied in the Old Testament or is occurring to the 7 churches of Asia because of prophesies and those different stories. So it all relates together. With the center focus being who? Jesus Christ. That's correct. Him coming to this earth and Him being triumphant over evil and those sort of things. And the main message again was what? To endure, because who is going to be triumphant? Jesus and the church, right? We're going to get through that as we go along. So,
That's what Jesus said, he that endureth to the end, the same shall be saved.
that's correct. Absolutely. All right. The terminology here, the reason the Revelation is so different from other New Testament books is that it was written in Old Testament terminology. So the language style in Revelation is more aligned with the language style that was in the Old Testament. So there are tons of Old Testament allusions and different things that we see. Daniel, those sort of things kind of relate together. Okay. This study, like we talked about, why is this important? If you look at secular things going on now, they're going to tell you about Armageddon. They're going to tell you about the rapture, the tribulation, 1,000-year reign of Jesus, and the millennial teachings from the preacher on television or in popular books, right? We're going to see that all over the place. Can we easily get things out of context with Revelation and start thinking all kind of crazy images? Kind of like what you talked about. People are going to think, oh, this is, this is not for us until later on. Who else did the exact same thing in the Old Testament? The Jews, right? They heard all these messages, okay? Also in Daniel, we're going to see here in just a minute, they did the same thing. Oh, it's just foretell. It's not in our generation. We don't have to worry about that. But we're going to see something very different in Revelation that we haven't seen before. The approach that we need to take with this study, like I said, do not get discouraged, but the second paragraph there, this is a modest goal for the study, is to simply work towards a better understanding than what you began with. Okay? I want us to focus on that so that we don't get discouraged. Now, some of you might be going, well, I've got a basic understanding. Great. I'm glad. You're going to have great comments. Great comments to add to this class. But if I tried to jump in too deep, I'm going to lose people very quickly. I'd probably lose myself. Okay? And I don't want that. I want us to have an attainable goal at the end of the class so that we stay focused, we all row together, and we all go to the same direction. Also understanding that we cannot take things necessarily literal in Revelation. Okay? If we take everything literal, like serpents and dragons and all this stuff, if we think that it's literal just like the rest of the New Testament, we're going to get lost very quickly. Okay? So we need to take things as not literal. There's very little things that are literal, but don't take everything in Revelation as a literal thing. Okay? Read it as that picture book. Read it with an understanding that somebody else had a message that we're trying to figure out. Okay? We have to take that mindset differently than any other book we've ever read. Okay. A couple of paragraphs if you're following along with me, the next page in the introduction, there's a couple of things that we're going to read here to help us understand. On the second paragraph there, this book was written 2,000 years ago. When it was written, at the time it was written, for who it was written, and the message that was being delivered, it said, the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave to Him to show His servants what must soon take place. What must soon take place. Okay? Then in chapter 1, verse 3, he urges his readers to take to heart what is written because the time is near. Okay? These are important to note. These are not figurative. These are direct messages to the churches of Asia that whatever is being written down right now is going to happen in their generation. It is fixing to happen, and it's going to happen quickly, so take note and understand. So the 1, 2, 3, 4, the fourth paragraph down. If John walked into your presence today and he handed you a scroll and that scroll said, this is about what is soon to take place, what would you do? And if he repeated it 3 different times whenever he talked to you, said these things are going to shortly come to pass, they're going to soon happen, pay attention to what's being written. Does that mean that whatever he just gave you, if you read the whole thing and then you said, these things are true and must soon take place, what would you think they might be hundreds or thousands of years away? Does that make sense? No, it doesn't.
No, it said it in chapter 1, but just in case we didn't understand it, he said it in the last chapter.
He said it twice in the last chapter. And he said it twice in the first chapter, and then he also says it 2 or 3 times in the middle. He over and over and over, he reiterated that. Now, don't seal it up because the time is near. Okay, so don't roll this back up and go put it off on the shelf. You need to get this on your mind and pay attention. Right? The truth is, the book of Revelation deals with things that relate to the Roman Empire or the fourth beast of Daniel 7. Daniel chapter 7. We're going to be, if we relate those Old Testament books together, or those stories together, we're going to see a lot of similarities, right? When it comes into conflict with the New Testament church back in the first centuries, Revelation presents Rome as the tool and instrument of Satan in conflict with Christians who are the body of Christ, the army of the white-horsed rider whose name is the Word of God. Where else do we see that term? In the beginning, the Word was God and was with God. Who is that talking about? Jesus. Jesus was the Word before He came to this earth. Well, what does this just say here in Revelation? That white horse rider whose name is the Word of God. Who are they talking about? Jesus, right? So we have an image. We have a picture book. Wherever my picture book just went. I have a picture book. I have a pale white horse rider. It's easy because we associate that, right? We've got a picture. We've got an image. I got this white-robed, brilliant-looking person on a white horse, magnificent, right? This great image. And we know who to associate that with now because I have his name. And we know the Old Testament and the New Testament even talked about who he was and what his name was. His name was the Word. So now I've got an image with who he is. Okay? So let's just look at things that way as we associate things together. And it comes to focus in particular the Roman Empire, or Domitian, who stands for all the Roman Empire stood for. So we're looking at Domitian, the Roman Empire, and the conflicts that are going on with the Christians. The next page over is something else that is misunderstood throughout secular understanding of Revelation. And like we talked about, people said that God's time didn't matter, and that with Him 1 day is like 1,000 years, and at hand or soon to happen may mean anything, right? They say it's true, of course, that God isn't bothered by time, but His creatures are. So if God had been talking to Himself, this would have been relevant. I think we can agree with that. If God was speaking to Himself, time doesn't matter to Him. But every time He's ever talked to humans, does He put it in context for humans? Yes, He does. Every single time, He understands the rules that He set in place, that time matters to us. So He's not going to communicate to us in such a way that secretively or in coding saying that, well, time doesn't matter. Well, it does matter, because he would not send us a message and then expect us to mess it up. He would not allow us to do that. If God had been talking to Himself, this would have been relevant, but God was talking to us little people. And He takes our humanity into account, as in Ezekiel 12, 21 through 28, and Daniel 8, 26 show us. So in Daniel 8, 26, God says the vision there concerns the distant future. Now wait a minute. Does God understand time? He does. He made it. Okay? And in his messages, he is distinguishing between a distant future and a near future. All right? So that's God's nature. He is not going to give us some weird timeline that we don't understand. In Daniel, he says the distant future. Okay, but God doesn't, there is no distant future with God. He wasn't talking to himself. When he spoke to the human limitation of understanding, he spoke with the distant future. So he knows what the words like that mean. Then the ungodly mock God's message in Ezekiel chapter 12. Like you had talked about, these threats are empty. They won't be fulfilled. Then they said, well, maybe they'll be fulfilled, but visions he sees is for many years from now. And he prophesies about the distant future. Okay? So that's what people at the time of Ezekiel and Daniel, the message that was going on, that's what they were seeing. Yes, sir?
When Daniel prophesied, read that in Daniel, that he was told to seal the book. This, in Revelation, don't seal the book.
That's right. And also in Revelation, we see that the seals were opened. We're going to see that. These seals were opened. So what he had sealed up in the past as prophecies were now being opened. So the message is coming true. Those things are coming shortly to pass. Okay, so we keep those in mind. So people were saying that these threats are empty. It's not going to be fulfilled. Or it's going to happen in the distant future. I don't have to worry about it. I'll be dead and gone by then. And how did God answer them? He answered them in the words we find in Revelation. Say to them, the days are near. It shall be fulfilled without delay. They said, don't worry, it's a long time off. And God said, pay attention. You're wrong. Pay attention right now. It's fixing to happen. Okay? Who is this again? Who are we talking about? The 7 churches of Asia. This is who the message is for. These are the ones that has to wake up. The time is near. And he's also encouraging them. But this is also a message to the people who are persecuting them. That prophecy that you've been told about, you said ain't going to happen, it's coming. And it's fixing to happen. And it's going to be fulfilled. So if you compare Daniel 8:26 and Revelation 22:10, and common sense comes into play here. One says, seal up the vision for it concerns the distant future. And the other one says, don't seal up the prophecy because the time is near. He's telling John, don't seal this up. You need to deliver this message and do it quickly and get it to them so that they fully understand. All right, so I think we can kind of understand, we see the difference between prophecy. This is not a prophecy. The book of Revelation is not a prophecy. It is a message that has to be quickly given and is not a distant prophecy. Let me take that back. It's not a distant prophecy. It is a prophecy of things shortly to come to pass. It's going to happen in a very narrow time frame or in their lifetime. Their lifetime. So one of the last lines down here, the safest approach to Revelation is to let John tell us what is time frame rather than us telling John. Okay? So let's listen to what John has to say. Don't dream up these crazy, 1,000 years and try to represent all these numbers together. John's already told us in the beginning, about halfway through, and he's going to tell us again at the end. These things are shortly to come to pass. It's going to happen. So keep that in mind, that there's no craziness. What did he say here on the back? We can get this wrong. The next paragraph over here. The central message is when the smoke clears and the followers of the Lord Christ are triumphant and that His lordship is made concrete and local here on the earth. The Roman Empire claims dominion, but it's a satanic claim. They prove it by brutally and cruelly. The church insists that Jesus has dominion and prove it just followers of Christ by outliving, outsuffering, and outlasting the Roman Empire. Okay? There's the proof in the pudding. The church was triumphant through all of this, if you look back in secular history. But people have messed up the message, something severe. Okay? They even said, where was this other one? There was one more in here. I'm trying to remember where I saw it. I thought I had it underlined. They tried to say that it was... where did it go? It was something crazy, but there was a message in here that, like, how did you get that from Revelation? I don't understand. Above literary style, is that what you said? I know I had it written down. Let me see here. Oh, there it is. Yes, that's it. Thank you. Yeah. The paragraph right above literary style there says that all these different things, people come up with these crazy ideas, and all that they warned us was going to happen, and the Coca-Cola would run out. Yes, that's how bad things got butchered. People thought that the Coca-Cola company was going to run out. That was what Revelation was prophesying to us, okay? That's how silly things got. So let's not go to worry about what things going on today and what's going, what indicators we have that are matching up with things of wars and different things that we got going on. Okay, the two major elements here. The Emperor Domitian, who stands for all this brutal and bestial in the Roman Empire. Can we say that if we know anything about the Roman Empire, can we say that they got pretty bad? They got real bad, right? They got bloodthirsty. They got, they were persecuting people. They were persecuting the church, different things. So the Roman Empire got really bad. That's why the Roman Empire fell. And what God was trying to tell them in this message was, you better get prepared because it's fixing to happen.
Did the Roman Civil War happen during this time period?
I will have to look at that up and find out because I don't know off the top of my head. So I apologize, for not knowing that. But I can look that up to find the Roman Civil War. I'll make a note and I'll try to find out by next week. So Domitian and what's going on in Rome. And then if we understand Daniel 2 and 7 are demonstrated as done, right? So what was prophesied in Daniel 2 and 7, Revelation comes to close that open seal now, and that was going to be the fate of the Roman Empire. Then Nahum prophesied the fall of Nineveh in 612 BC, but to call it useless or irrelevant would be silly, right? So what we're seeing is those prophecies, if we're not paying attention to the prophecies when things are told that they're going to happen, when God makes a promise, when has He ever broken a promise to human mankind? He never has, right? When He says that something's going to happen, it's going to happen. So that's what's going on here. But as we close, and I think I'm going to actually have a little time back for you today as we close out. But the application here today is this book, Jesus is revealing. He's not trying to hide anything from us of what is fixing to happen. And God's plan is for His people in order to comfort those who will see and hear the message. God is simply saying, hang in there. Go through. You will prevail. I will take care of you. Bottom line, the book study's over. If you take that away, this is really what we should be focusing on, is the overarching message of Revelation. Okay, if we get lost into the weeds on dragons and all these different things and exactly what they represent, we're going to lose focus on what the true message of the book of Revelation is. Okay, so let's keep it simple through this study as best we can, and understand as much as we can, and then hopefully by the end of this we'll come out with a better understanding on the back end, and then learn and grow together. So again, I'm going to ask that your homework for the next week, when we come back together next week, have read Revelation 1. So what I'm planning on doing, just so y'all know, when we come in, I'm going to set up my audio phone reader so it will pronounce things appropriately instead of my redneck dialect. I'm going to set that up so it will read for us. And we're going to actually read through the chapters of the lesson in the beginning. And then we're going to go through and talk about things, and then we'll answer those questions at the end. That's the intent of the class, so that we can You can read it by yourself. We're going to read it again in class. So you're going to at least read through these chapters at least twice. Okay? They tell us statistically it takes 3 times for things to really solidify. So you got one more on your own. But we're going to read at least twice if you follow along with me, and you'll be right there as to pretty close to having a good understanding. Okay? So homework. Read through the next lesson, which would just be lesson 1. Read Revelation chapter 1. And then answer the 10 questions at the end and be prepared to discuss those. Does anybody have any comments or questions or any frustrations so far?
You know, when Jesus came the first time, they thought he was going to set up an earthly kingdom.
Uh-huh.
They say it's still think the same thing today.
The Jews do.
They misunderstand the book.
Absolutely. Any other questions or comments?
Even though it was written to that generation, the things that don't happen to them, it still applies to us. The principles and concept, the very theme that we talked about, comes from time Christ and Satan. That's the thing we start with. Realize what we go through, nothing like what our church went through.
Here's I'll tell you what, I'm glad you said that. Let me go back to one thing since we have a moment. If you go back to the 3rd page, the relevance of Revelation. There's great lessons that we're going to pull from this, and there's 7 at the bottom of the page there. But number 5 is important. This might dig a little bit. Pull your toes back in your shoes a little bit. That's okay. Revelation teaches us that God wants us to realize that He will not tolerate backsliding or stagnation, dull, sluggish, lazy, no action, stale, or flat. Moral decline and religious apostasy are real killers. There are several messages in here, but this is one of them. If we get stagnant as a church, what did Jesus say about the fig tree? What will happen if you don't produce fruit? You'll wither and die, and you will be cut down and cast away to make room for other growth. So I want us to take these things. These principles are important. Okay, and we're going to talk about the big principles as we go along, so that we can take the message away. We're not just going to get lost in historical data. We're going to bring these and pull these messages out. There are good things, but there are also some tough lessons that we got to understand too. So yes, let's go through those. I have so many notes and so many different things, but that's all right. I think that's enough for today. Brother Dale, would you mind leading us in prayer this morning?
Father, we thank you for today. It's another beautiful day, and we're grateful for that. Father, we're grateful for our time together to come and study. And Father, I pray that you'll be with us as we begin this study. And Father, sometimes it can be a little difficult, but give us understanding. Help us, Father, to put the work in and read and be open to discussion and open to changing our mind on things that we may have accepted as wrong. And Father, I thank you for Jason and his ability to teach and many hours of work that he puts in here, Father. We're grateful for that, and thank you for sending his family to us and giving us this resource. And Father, I pray that you'll be with us as we continue our worship time together. I pray, Father, that all that we do is pleasing to you. And Father, I pray that our classes have went well today, our kids have participated, our kids are happy to be here, our children, our teachers were there. And Father, watch over us in all we do. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Y'all hear her?
Get over there to the front now.